ṣé ẹ gbà pẹ̀lú tí Rufai Hussaini sọ àbírọ́ the genesis and wàhálà tó súyọ nílẹ̀ Nàìjíríà níbo láti toko ròkòdókòrókòtó ẹ jẹ́ ká gbọ́ lẹ́nu arákùnrin tó láyà bíi kìnìún yìí Rufai.
I titled it, I said the genesis of distortion. The reason why Nigeria it is today is because there's a genesis to the distortion. It didn't start today. And I'll take you back to some key dates. I'll take you back to the year 1914. The year 1914 was the year they amalgamated the Northern and the Southern Protectorate. But before then, the British had first amalgamated the Southern Protectorate. Because you see, when they came, they met us fighting ourselves. Prior to that time, we have fought the Kiriji and the Jalomi wars. So in the South, for instance, when the British came, the only thing they had to do was just to unite the warring factions. Because the Ijeshakiti Parakpo were fighting deep, the Oyo people and all of that. So we were fighting and we had made a lot of slaves. Most of the people that went from the Kiriji and Jalomi wars were those that went as slaves to Latin America. Those are the people that came back as what we call the Agudaos. These are the likes of the Darochas. So that's why you see that Lagos Island is filled with a lot of Brazilian architecture. They even celebrate Fanti Festival. In fact, we eat frijon in Christmas. Frijon is not native to us. It's Portuguese food. So those were the cultures they brought back. But how did we get those cultures? Because we were fighting. So they said the kingdom of God suffered violence. And all this violence can take us by force. We were already fighting from hitherto. Then the British came, settled the fight, then they colonized. The first inroad of the British in what is called Lagos colony today came in the middle 1800s when two people too were fighting over the throne of Lagos, Kosoko and Akitoye. So they called in the British to come and settle fights. But you see, when you call a bigger man to come and settle fights of something that is very juicy, what do? They take it from you. So when Akitoye went aboard a ship called the HMS Prometheus on the Lagos Marina here, and he said, the British said, we don't know what you're talking about. Sign this edict that you will cede Lagos to us. So Lagos became a crown colony, and that's why in 1906, the first thing we did was the Southern Protectorate, the other fighting parts of the Yoruba parts, and Lagos colony. And that's why you see up till 1960, in fact, when we gained independence in 1960, residents full-born in Lagos had the chance to either choose a British passport or a Nigerian passport. But a lot of them opted for Nigerian passport. So after that amalgamation, they started to rule over us. So guess the things they started to do to us. The first thing they did was they distorted our mindset. That's the genesis of the distortion. So they told you that your black color was never good enough. How did they do it? Indoctrinations. At first, they told you have to go through an education system. And after the education system, they said your language was not good enough, so they taught you in English. Have you ever wondered that if we are taught mathematics in Igbo, there will have been more people with a sound understanding of mathematics than in English? So the first thing you have to do, you have to learn your colonizer's language. And when you learn your colonizer's language, they took away your identity on how to think. So they call your customs and traditions idolatry. And the last thing they did was that they set up a fight between you, because they know if you are united, then there's going to be a problem. You remember the Tower of Babel? Even our God knew the importance of unity. So what did he do? He changed the language. So they set up a fight. And it's so easy. How would they do it? They have agents. Stir up ethnic strife. Yorubas will fight Hausa, Hausas will fight Igbos and all of that. And they fan the embers. And they constantly do it. So the first genesis of distortion was the initial colonialism. And they continued. In fact, they did it up till 1959 when we had the first elections, the 12th of December. You know what they deliberately did? That election, we know who won that election. Who had more votes? The NCNC had more votes. But originally, the British had planned that it was going to be a hung parliament. You know what they call a hung parliament? A hung parliament is when there's no clear winner in a parliamentary system. So you have to form a government of national unity. The British had known that it will be either the Yorubas and the Igbos, the Action Group, or the NCSC, and the MPC. The MPC was standard. So that was how they did it, and that was what happened. But they knew that was going to bring a very big problem. You had a boisterous Action Group in opposition. There was going to be problems. And they knew it was not going to last. And they knew that it was going to open more fault lines that led to the war in '66. So have you ever wondered that it was just after 6 years, after the first elections, no, then we had another elections in '64-65 that spanned into '64-65. So pretty much 6 years after the first election and 2-3 years after the second election, then we had a civil war that further deepened the fault line. So the first agent of distortion, and I'm sure we all know that, it will take years for you to recover from such a strife like that. So they have set the tone for what became the war, and they are giving it to us at a beat, and we are taking it. So once we are taking it, once we have fought the first civil war and all of that, and when the civil war started, they were the ones that started selling their weapons. So afterwards, they had started the first genesis of distortion. They had caused hatred amongst us. The hatred means that we will never be able to come together. And please, that's why I say every wall of hatred you have for your brother, break it. Because if they can take our unity, they can take our strength. So once they caused that hatred, we couldn't come together again. And that's what we've been circling with. In the last election, our problem was not about tribe or religion, but they made it about tribe or religion in the end. Because they know the genesis of distortion. So that's the first genesis of distortion. And that's why you see that life in Nigeria has now become something like an Obasian state. It is British. We talk about Leah Sharibu. Leah Sharibu is a symptom of a deeper problem. We talk about Nigeria not work. It was not structured in a way that it was going to work. Because people wanted to take it for their own benefits. And that's why they don't like the truth. That's why they want to dominate every sphere. They want to shut people down in the media when you try to rat them out. So they deliberately put all of these things in place so that these systems and these hegemonies will not make you come together or work. You think all of a sudden Boko Haram just starting? It's also part of a grand system. Now that we've properly destroyed parts of this country with kidnapping, insecurity, and all of that, it's easy for non-state actors to roam wild. So there was a genesis to the national distortion, and they knew what they were doing. Pre-independence, post-independence. This game is so big that our politicians are just being played as a pawn in the game. But you know why it's easy to play our politicians? Because they see their greed. A nation can never grow if the leaders are greedy.